The Shulchan Aruch at the end of Siman Taf Reish Pei Tet has an interesting admonition, which of course is educationally significant. In Seif Vav, the sixth section, the Shulchan Aruch says, Minhag Tov Lavi Ktanim Uktanot Lishmoa Mikra Megillah. That he calls it a minhag tov, even though before he said that the mitzvah, the rabbanon of chinuch, of educating your children, demands to do mitzvot, demands that you bring the children to hear the Megillah as well. But here he ends by saying these words, minhag tov. There's a... so he goes on. The Mishnah Berurah explains this. Ktanim v'ktanot. You can't bring very small children, the Mishnah Berurah says, because they just confuse things. They run around, they don't know what's happening, so you shouldn't bring those kind of children. But you should bring the ones who can hear. And now the Mishnah Berurah adds a comment, a personal comment. He says, in our times, Bavonotenu harabim, consider, our great transgressions, the situation is the opposite. Not only do the children come and they don't listen, but they make trouble for everybody else in the shul, they confuse the adults, and they prevent the adults from hearing Mikra Megillah. And the reason that they come, the reason what entices the children to come to shul is that they can beat Haman. Uvazeh, he says, in just bringing children to shul to make noise when the name of Haman is mentioned, Ein ha'av mekayem mitzvat chinuch klal. Remember that this is not the way you do the mitzvah of educating your children, because the education that we want to give them is that you have to hear the Megillah, not that you have to bang when Haman's name is mentioned. And in fact, the Mishnah Berurah says, when it comes to, if chinuch, if education to mitzvot is the important thing, so really every father should keep his children near him and make sure that they hear the reading of the Megillah. And when the reader mentions the name of Haman, then certainly the child is allowed to beat, to make noise, as the minhag is. But imagine that you bring a child to shul, and he thinks that the main thing that is going on, is making noise when Haman's name is mentioned. So this is not only... It cannot be called chinuch, because chinuch means chinuch, to do the mitzvah right and not to do the mitzvah wrong. But this is anti-chinuch, because here's a child, when he grows up, he's going to think that he fulfills his obligation on Purim by making weird kinds of noises when Haman's name is mentioned, and that is certainly not acceptable. He says now, he goes on and says that because of all of this, it's proper that every person should have his own Megillah, so he can read silently or whisperingly. He can read each word from his Megillah, so that when the noise of Haman comes into play, then you'll still be Yotzei Kriyat Megillah, which has to be done word for word. So we see that the Mishnah Berurah was painfully aware of the problem of Megillat Esther, and that we have to, and he enjoins us to remember that there's a mitzvah here, and the mitzvah is to read the Megillah and to hear it. And while it's true that there's a minute to make noise when Haman's name is mentioned, it's not true that the noise should be dominant and listening to the words should be secondary or less important. This is not chinuch, this is not education, and it's certainly not the way for us to do the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. In many shuls today, there is an effort made that the Megillah should be read and should be heard, and that the noise made when Haman's name is mentioned should not make it impossible to hear the words of the Megillah, and that is the proper way to read the Megillah.